and improve quality with defect prevention with our guest, Jan Princen. First of all, I'd like to tell you a little bit about our company and today's house rules with today's webinar. This webinar is presented by XBOSoft. We are a software testing and quality assurance consulting company. We've been around since 2006. We help clients improve the quality of their software in various industries, from healthcare to finance. And we do have offices in San Francisco, Beijing, and the Netherlands. We'd like to move on to today's house rules. Everyone aside from our speakers today is in listen-only mode, and we do encourage you to post your questions in the panel to the right of your screen. We will try to field those questions throughout the webinar, but we'll get to those at the end as well, depending on time. Now, you can also post your questions on Twitter, and we encourage you to do so at XBOSoft and using today's hashtag Defect Prevention. We will try to field those questions as well, and those we don't get to, we'll direct message or answer via our blog following the webinar. Today's presenters and speakers, we have Phil Liu, CEO of XBOSoft, and myself, Carla Smith, Marketing Manager. And real quickly, I also want to remind you that this webinar will be recorded, and you will receive an email following the webinar with that information as well. And I will now pass you on to Phil, who will introduce you to our guest presenter. Phil?
Okay, thanks, Carla. We're really glad to have this webinar and get Jan Princen here with us today. Jan is the founder of Grip QA, and he's worked with several ISVs both in the United States and Europe. And Grip QA focuses on software development intelligence. So I'm really, and you know, when I talked to Jan about doing the webinar, we talked about what kind of intelligence that they're gathering, and basically they're trying to help software companies build better quality software, and a lot of their work in terms of intelligence looks at defects and where they come from. And these days with Agile and trying to move quickly, what their tool does is really be able to get that information and process it quickly and help, therefore, prevent defects from ever happening in the first place. So we're really glad to have you here, Jan. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Carla. I'm very excited to be here with you guys today. And shall we get started?
Yeah. Okay. Here we go.
Okay. Phil, let me get started with it.
Can you
Yeah,
guys?
the screen's fine.
Look
Full
at
screen.
this. Look at this. Wow. Look at these jeans.
Yeah, Phil, would you wear these jeans?
Well, I do have some jeans like this, actually, and I do wear them. It depends on the occasion. If I'm working outside, I may wear these, or if I feel like I'm hanging out with a bunch of young folks and I want to be cool, I may use these as well.
He's right. The audience might not know that Phil and I actually know each other quite well. We stay at each other's houses, so occasionally he does walk around in these jeans. Carla, could you ask the audience?
Let's see, we're going to start off the poll here. And here we go. We're starting off the poll, and we're going to see who wears these jeans.
Okay, while the audience answers the questions, I want to kick it off with a story. How I learned that it's important to clearly define what is a defect. When I just started my career, I was working in the Netherlands in custom software development, and we were building a custom ERP system for a client. And I guess some of you guys are laughing already. The contract agreement we had with the clients that we would work in iterations, releases, in an agile-ish process. We've worked with 6 to 8 week releases, followed by a period of acceptance testing. During acceptance testing, I think you can close the poll now, Phil.
It looks like we've got 63% of people that would wear these jeans. Yeah.
Okay. I guess it's a younger crowd than you and I.
Right.
But we had this acceptance test period, and we kind of got in a very toxic situation where the management on the client side tried to push. We don't have the slides filled, by the way. Yeah, it's back. They try to push as much features as possible in the acceptance test periods because we would fix them for free. Of course, we try to stop that as much as possible, and instead of just having fun and building a nice ERP system, most of this time was spent talking, nagging, stopping each other to put the right defects in. That's the first time I learned that it's important to get agreements on both sides or within a company on what a defect is. Phil, how do you guys handle this at XBO? Do you have a defect definition you use, or?
Jan, that's a good question. We work with many clients, and they tend to define defects in different ways, either in different ways or a lot of times they don't define them very well at all. So I don't know if I've answered the question or not, but your definition that you've got here in terms of incorrectness, unexpected result, I would say probably incorrectness is something that's not very well defined. Unintended ways or unexpected result probably is something that people use, but the only problem is sometimes expected is not very well defined either.
Do you ever have issues with the client and your teams on false positives?
We do, actually, and we try to minimize those. As a software testing company, our product is defects. So if we report defects that are not really defects, like you would say, I guess a false positive, that's not very good. So sometimes it takes a while to figure out what a false, how to prevent those false positives.
Well, like we saw with the jeans, right? 63% would wear the jeans, and another 37 would not wear the jeans. You would wear them. I would probably not wear them.
Mm-hmm.
A defect is in the eye of a beholder. There are two images. One is of the girl, a young girl who obviously bought these jeans off the shelf, and the other is of a golfer who would not wear them.
Yeah, there you go. I think we got
okay.
Final.
Yeah, we got them.
Okay.
So I guess you're more in the fashionable category, and I'm more in the golf category.
Yeah.
Many types of defects, if you can move to the next slides, and many ways to classify defects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well,
you have the feature of a bug. That's a discussion that we got bogged down in, which is difficult. I think many of our listeners are familiar with is defects with different priorities, P1, P2, or important, not important, whatever system your issue tracking uses, found by different people, found at different time zones, times in the development life cycle. What kind of defects do you encounter, Phil, or is this what you guys see as well?
Yeah, I think this is what we see as well. I think something you don't have listed here, but it's implied is the type of functional defects, which could go within each of any of these bullet points, really, in terms of found by, who they're found by, when they're found, and the type of priority that they have. Something that you don't mention in here is cosmetic defects. Sometimes
yes.
Defects that don't necessarily impact the real function of the software. Some of our customers might not care about that kind of thing, but they're actually quite important as well.
Exactly, and I remember from the old times a lot of platform defects. Remember IE6 defects? I remember we have a whole list of those with the browser.
Right, okay. Yeah, so I guess, the thing here is that we're trying to, in order to prevent defects, we first have to know what we're trying to prevent.
Exactly. It's very important that you have a clear idea of what you want to prevent in order to set up a successful effort. Similar if you have your house and you want to exterminate some vermin, right? You want to know if you're targeting spiders or it's rats that you're targeting. And with many of our clients, the first thing we do is really this exercise of what exactly is it that you want to prevent and perhaps eliminate.
And
So,
what would
sorry,
what
go
would
ahead.
be the result of most of those conversations in terms of what kinds of things they're really looking to prevent?
I'm a big fan, and what I try to is something the defects found after release
Mm-hmm.
by clients, by users.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those are very high on my priority list. Um, but it really depends, it also depends how they classify it. Sometimes, if they do focus on security more, those things are much more important, say if you're talking to finance or military organizations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Or perhaps they want to target a specific, locale, a country or something.
So would you say maybe the statement should be what kind of defects that they want to prevent versus what the defect, maybe that's just a grammatical thing, the difference between Dutch guys and native English speakers, I suppose.
I probably, yeah. And I think it's also possible to prioritize later on. You can work on one type of defect first and then go on to another one.
Right, right. Okay. Okay.
And we usually try to have an exercise with several people in the organization, both of the technical staff and the more business staff, in
Right,
order to get everyone on the same page. And one of the things that we find hard is to get them on the same page.
right.
And usually, especially the business is not that interested in preventing. It should just not happen. How
So,
do you guys handle that? How do you get the business involved in QA efforts?
well, most of the time we have a lot of stakeholder meetings to, just as you do, in going through their people, what they do, and the processes that they have, and the product and some of the issues that they're having with the product from their own point of view as well as from the user point of view, and that's where we start. I see that you guys do something very similar, but with a data perspective.
Yeah, exactly. Let me tell a little bit background on how we got started with Grip. I was working as a consultant, helping companies improve their development processes. And the fun thing, if you're a consultant, is that you visit many different organizations, whereas a normal employee might work for 10, 20 companies in a lifetime. For someone visiting a lot of these companies, that could easily happen in a month. And you go there, and like you say, you ask questions, right? You talk to several people in the organization, and after doing this for some time, I kind of found a pattern, right? I mean, they have A, B, C. Those are their problems. Then their solutions should be X, Y, Z. And being consultants, that's good news, right? That means that with relatively minimal effort, we're able to present solutions and even reuse solutions that we presented.
Mhm.
Then my idea was, okay, if I'm able to go in, do some sort of data analysis through to questioning and speaking with people, would it be possible to do something like this in software? That's about 2 years ago, and at that point I met my co-founder Camille, senior architect, and he was working on similar ideas using data to make predictions on the outcome of development, but purely focusing on code level. Um, 2 years ago, I guess we spent a couple of months sketching, like you see in the background, having ideas, and we kind of created our first prototype where we integrate with the tools that development organizations use to manage their software development. Issue tracking, source code repositories, test case management, whatever. We get the data out, we analyze that data, and we present our analysis in the terms of KPIs that organizations may or may not reach. That's in a nutshell is what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And then you do your analysis, setting up your model and your interfaces and then doing your analysis, in order for it to fit in with Agile, you have to do that kind of stuff, possibly not set up, but as far as producing some predictions, they have to be done on a fairly regular basis and pretty adaptable. Is that?
Yeah, you're right, and then this is one of the things that we have struggled with a lot, or it's an interesting problem, is the periods people use it. And if you look at an organization, and it's funny you mentioned agile, and I think this is a larger concern for organizations that want to move agile. The higher ups are not as flexible as the people really working in a team. So where you have the developers and testing working in their sprints, they would need almost or near real-time information to base their decisions on. Whereas management was more interested in quarterly or monthly information because that's the timeline they work with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess it depends again on the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, that's one of the things I mean, we underestimated when starting this, that there's still a lot of, context with software development. Well, you know a lot about that, right?
Sure. So, most people are interested in defects. So you really got into that and trying to analyze software quality in terms of defect prevention, right?
Exactly, yeah. In speaking with all these organizations, the one thing everyone cares about is defects. Or, I mean, there's no one that says, give me more defects, right?
Right.
So this is something that's the red line that goes through all these organizations, and we focus our tool specifically on some defect analysis. And today, later on, we're going to focus on preventing defects through our defect correlation analysis.
So tell us a little bit about some of the root causes that you found and how you came about finding these.
Yeah, using this analysis, there are three things that always pop out as root causes for defects. The first one is the skill gap between team members. Many organizations, there's some people are very skilled in a particular thing, some are less in that one. There can be a huge difference between the skills of the people. This is something that is known by managers and very often acted upon. Our experience, if you quantify this and you show this, it's much easier to take action and start improvements. And the second root cause that we see is not based on the people, but it's more on the areas of your software projects. So there might be certain modules or areas where not enough people are working on. And what happens if this person retires? What happens if this person goes on holiday? One of our clients here, they do salary administration software in the Netherlands, and they exist for, I think, 40 years. I mean, that's more than a career of one person. So how do you ensure that the old code that's written, that still is inside the system, can be maintained if necessary? That's one of the things we find. And another third one is that there are just different expectations in terms of the teams on what defects are. It's more a general one where we would recommend, to set KPIs with stakeholders.
Okay. Yeah, the first two seem really interesting here. It seems like you could really, if you find skilled team members, you're talking about pairing them up. So you're pairing up perhaps one that is a little bit less experienced with one that's more experienced and so forth, and finding those guys.
Yes, exactly. Either letting them work like in pair programming, letting them sit next to each other, or another thing that is very low cost and has a very high impact on quality improvement is review sessions. Letting people review each other's code could also be test cases or test results. But we find by teaming up, the less skilled with the more skilled, it's a very easy, effective way to share knowledge. And as an added bonus, it also increases team cooperation because they understand more of each other's thinking.
Right. Well, we are going to come to the next slide, which is all about defects. We talked about defects that are metrics that matter. So this is the top one, Jan.
Yeah, and when we did our practice session before that, both of us had a laugh. The thing that people always ask us when we have a first meeting is, what are the metrics that matter? What metrics should I use? What metrics other companies are using? And we mentioned before the defect in productions. I think this is a very important one, the defect removal efficiency. the ratio of the defects found and fixed before release versus those found after release or after a period after release.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree with the importance of this one, or?
Yeah, definitely I agree with it. I guess the issue is that where you have X there, with Agile, that X is shortening, of course,
Yes,
and so
agreed.
it tends to be a moving target, and there's also a lot of different context that goes into that formula because the teams are changing and maybe they're working on different things and different people that worked on a sprint versus the next sprint. So sometimes this metric may not be as stable or comparable between sprints as you'd like it to be.
Yeah, if people are interested in it, they can reach out to me, and we have some ways how to modify it slightly so it's a better fit with Agile. But you're right. I think the book I mentioned here, which I strongly recommend to people interested in this topic, and I guess they're here because they are interested.
Right.
I think he gives 90 days after release, but 90 days in Agile, that's an aeon, right? There's so many things that happen there, so it's
Right.
hard to do it. But
Yeah.
for those of you who work Agile and are interested in implementing this, just shoot me an email or shoot Carla an email, and
Yeah.
we can help you guys with
I
that.
know that Capers Jones has 90 days, which is like 10 years in Agile.
Yeah, it's a lifetime. But the book itself talks about many other metrics, and again, I can recommend it. This is one that is created by us, created by Camille actually. Entropy. And entropy measures the rate of change in software projects. And I'll try to give an analogy to explain on why this is important. In Holland, most boys play soccer, football, when they're young. So they start between the ages 6 to 8, and then they continue playing for a few years. I started as well, and when I was 8, and the team was moderately successful, and we enjoyed ourselves, and we stayed with the same team, when we got 9, 10, 11, 12, etc. And nothing much happened, Occasionally some of the boys' parents moved and they changed, but we usually, I think there are 11 players in the field and you have 2, 3 on the bench, so we usually stuck with the 13, 14 people group for the whole duration, right up until we were 16. At 16, boys, well, not just in the Netherlands, but everywhere, they get interested in girls and they prefer to be a Saturday night in the bar instead of Sunday morning on the soccer field. So that year we lost over 50% of our team and the results were dramatic. Same with software. You cannot run a software project without changing. You have to change. In many cases, change is good. But if there's too much change at the same time, chances are that that can cause problems. And that's what we measure with entropy. And if you look at the chart below, there we have the plotted the entropy analysis next to the issue created for Docker, the popular tool. And you see there's a relation between the two.
Yeah, so as we talked about this earlier, Jan, this chart is actually the rate of change rather than changes themselves. So I think that's really it's quite an interesting chart here where trouble happens, where the rate of change goes beyond a certain threshold, I guess you could say even.
Exactly, and clients use this again, are my levels of entropy too high? Is too much change happening now? Should I postpone the release a little bit? Should I add more testing because we touched more parts of the system? Those are decisions our clients use our entropy analysis with.
Okay, so when you talk about change, though, change has many forms. You could have changes in the code, you could have changes in people, you can have many kinds of changes.
This is focus on code. The amount of data required to count the number of files changed with each commit recorded in source control.
Just from a source control analysis then on the code.
Exactly. You're right. I guess we don't have that, but it would be an interesting analysis to focus on other aspects because I think it applies to say stuff like people as well.
Yeah, I mean,
test cases perhaps.
Yeah, there's a reason that code changes, and getting to those reasons would be the precursor to this. Actually, if you saw that code had a high rate of change at certain periods, you could say, okay, well, why is that happening, right? And work on those things.
Yeah. And then for those that are interested, I put the URL in there where you can find more information on it. Oh, you just switched the slide.
Sorry about that. Yeah, let me go back and where's the URL? Oh, this one here on
That's the URL. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we can either help you set this specific analysis up, but it's also open source, so you could also play around with it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so we move back to defects.
Yeah, here we are.
Okay. Yeah, like we said, prevention starts with detecting patterns, right? You want to see the X, understand the X that caused the Y in order to, remove the X so we don't have the Y. Oh, sorry. In a software project, every file is written by one or more people. Every bug touches one or more files. And what we're going to do, we're going to calculate the chance that a file requires a bug fix.
Okay.
Okay. And we do this with something that we call suspicion by association. I give you an example, like if 10 murders take place in San Francisco or Amsterdam, and you're the detective and you're studying the video footage of, the surroundings of the murder at the time of the murder, and every time you look there and, we see Carla standing there.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough to convict Carla. It's not enough probably to arrest Carla, but it is enough to invite Carla for a conversation and try to find out more. And we do something similar here. We make an analysis, and it's not proof, but if it happens, over and over again, it's worthwhile to have a closer look. So what do? An author has one or more commits with a total number of line chains, and each bug fix has a commit with a total number of line chains, and both of these we cross-reference. And in the next slide you can see how that works. So in this project you would have two files, two authors, file A and file B, and person 1 and person 2. After release there's one defect found. That defect is fixed. Part of the defect was fixed in file A, part of the fix was in file B. And then what we do, we calculate the percentage contribution of both, and that way we get a total defect contribution for each author.
So I guess person number 2 is kind of in trouble here, huh?
Yeah, well, these are still fairly close, but a little bit, yeah.
Okay. So you end up having something like this where you have all the guys together.
Yeah, well, actually there are many ways to slice and dice this data, and going back to what we told at the beginning, it really depends on the role of the person we're talking to. This is a level where you see the relative change of the team over time. Person most interested is a manager, a team leader. He will use these charts in order to discuss improvement plans, coaching, etc., and look at the results of that. For an individual developer, we have other things which are much more interesting. We have like commit analysis, where the individual commit would be analyzed and they would be given, a green light or an orange light based on the chance that it will contribute to defects. And this is especially helpful in pull requests or code reviews, where you can decide how much time you're going to spend on reviewing someone else's code based on the risk that has.
Mm-hmm. So would you start with this and then work backwards onto those other things that you just mentioned in terms of, let's look at, for instance, Willem. He's not doing too well in terms of his overall contribution to defects. And then you would go backwards and say, okay, well, I think we need to do a commit analysis on William.
Exactly, or let Willem do his own commit analysis, or make sure that other people review his code. But what this one doesn't show is the code contribution. Perhaps Willem is also contributing a very large part of the code. Mm-hmm. So in order for you to decide how to focus your time, the commit analysis will help that. Say a commit in technology X is low risk because that is something that Willem is prone to be good at. A
Right.
commit in technology Y is something that has more risk because there's more defects there. He creates more defects there.
Yeah. I guess something this doesn't show is how much of the product Willem is developing versus how much of the product that Leo is developing.
Exactly. This is just one aspect of it, and yeah, because it's a flat PPT, it's difficult to go in the application itself.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for technology, right? Another decision that managers and technical people face is, should we replace a certain technology?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those discussions, are emotional, heated, and oftentimes it's difficult to find a common ground that both parties can understand and relate to.
Mm-hmm.
These things will help that, technology X, you guys might like it, but it is causing all the defects, and we might save time, money, etc. if we change it.
So do you do this kind of analysis, I guess, with different functions as well? I can imagine you would have, the light blue could be reporting, and then the purple could be some other function like, some kind of data entry function and so forth.
Exactly, on the application level, right? Functions.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Exactly, and you get more like a 3D view or quantitative view of what your project is doing.
Yeah.
And I think, in our preparatory discussion, you mentioned, aren't people worried that they get accused or finger pointing?
That's right. Yeah.
It is an issue, not an issue that it happens, but an issue that it's a concern for people. We haven't seen this. Not saying that it couldn't, or that there might be people that want to use it for this purpose. What we see is that people use it more to look for improvements and try to do better. And I think the current mindset, especially with Agile, is really on self-improvement teams, improving teams, and the time, that it's punishment or kick people out is not what we see in technology companies nowadays. Not sure if that's your experience as well, Phil. How do you feel about that?
Well, I guess that depends on the culture of the company and how they're implementing Agile as, continuous improvement and cooperating and working together versus finger pointing, which could occur as well. So that's more of a cultural thing. And I think that, as many companies migrate to Agile and that kind of thinking, they're not really ready for it. So this could be dangerous to those types of companies, but maybe if you're, a startup starting with zero culture, right, and no baggage, I guess you could say, and just starting off Agile right away, this I think would be very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So you have some
Okay.
top 3 improvements. I think this is what everybody's wants to hear about today.
Well, this is more specific for one case, but we showed a little bit about our defect analysis, but the larger part of GRIP can be used for KPI predictions. So we measure 40 metrics from your development process, and based on that we can make predictions if you are going to make your KPIs or you're not going to make them.
Yeah.
And the example that you see here is DRE, defect removal efficiency. And based on our analysis, we look at those metrics that we gather, which one are most important to tackle. So in this particular case, it's code duplication, the amount of acceptance criteria per requirement, and the code complexity that you have to work on.
Mm-hmm. So based on your analysis and, that you said KPI, so the KPI is DRE and you're trying to get better at DRE, and these top 3 things were picked out of, say, 40 as a way to get better at DRE?
No, the 40 of those 40, these have the highest impact. So if from all the things that you could do, you work on code duplication or you decrease it, that will have the highest impact on increasing your DRE, or that's what we predict. And if you go to the yellow box here, we don't claim that we can replace human judgment. The way I suggest you would use predictive analytics or quantitative analysis is to augment your own decision making. So look at our analysis and look at your own judgment, and if you think code duplication is not important, but it continues to keep top of the list on ours, it might be something, or I suggest very strongly you have a look at it. I'm reading the book. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask, these are the top 3. Do you have any others that might be, worthwhile for people to look at besides these 3 that maybe you saw in other companies?
You mean issues that people tackle?
Well, you have these top 3 improvements. What would be the next 2, for instance?
Oh, what would you think would be the next 2? People, maybe? I would suggest work on people.
Yeah, people skills in certain areas. It's hard to say. Your analysis is based on the code itself, so it's kind of hard to.
Well, requirements is one where you always see a lot of things. It's a little bit harder to analyze because you need some textual analysis, but it's fairly, or I should say easy. We can pinpoint out that there's something amiss there. That's an area where a lot of things happen. Testing, right? Is there enough testing relative to effort? Those are other things.
Right, but these are things that would occur outside of the tools that you use, because these things are not really about analyzing code.
Testing is something we would analyze, and the requirements as well.
Okay.
If you look at the number 2 is acceptance criteria per requirement.
Right. Okay.
So.
Interesting. Well, I guess we're here with how you get this stuff going, Jan.
Yeah, like I said, first really determine or define what you want to prevent. Usability defects, performance defects, priority 1, etc. And make sure you label these in the systems that you use. Second step that you should do is you log these issues number, these labels in your commits, so we can cross-reference both of them, and then suggest some clear KPIs with all the stakeholders so you can measure the results of your efforts. 2 ways to get started. If you do this, you can connect with our data model and dashboards, or if you're inclined, you could create one for your own.
And what's in your data model? What do you mean by that?
The analysis, the black box through which we analyzed the stuff.
Oh, okay. So that's all like top secret. If you told us, you'd have to kill us.
Almost, yeah.
Okay, we won't ask about that then. Okay, I think I haven't seen any questions asked throughout the presentation, but I guess we're towards the end here. Does anybody have any? If anybody has any questions, you can write them into the panel. Let's see. I don't think I see any questions here, Jan.
Okay, must have done a good job then.
Yeah, I guess so. Carla?
Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation, you two. I want to just thank everybody for joining us today. And if any questions do come up, you can feel free to email those to us at our email address here, services@xbosoft.com. You can also Twitter those to us, and we'll respond to those either via direct message or via our blog that comes out on a regular basis. So thank you. I'm sorry?
I was going to say, there is one question. I guess this
great.
Chandra wanted to ask, it's not really a question, but possibly a comment, and maybe Jan can comment on this because you work with a lot of small companies, Jan. But Chandra says that usually small companies are not interested in metrics and processes.
Interesting point. I think they are interested, but very often they don't have the resources to implement these. If you go to the large enterprises, they very often already have a staff of people working on this. We try to create low-way tooling that they can implement without a lot of overhead. I mentioned the commit analysis tool that integrates with GitHub. So there's not much overhead to an existing development process, and it's very geared for very small organizations that want to benefit from some of the stuff that a few years back only the large ones could do.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the point really is that collecting some of this information is not really that difficult. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's already there in many cases.
yeah. Okay. Carla, well, I guess we're done here. We got Chandra's comment, I think, covered, and I think that probably is a good topic for a really a good blog in terms of the types of metrics or processes and information that small companies versus large companies would be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Good idea.
Great. Yep, and those blogs do come out on a weekly basis, so watch for those. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, all of our social media channels to watch for those blog topics and watch for those as those come out on a regular basis, as I said. So thank you all so much for attending today. You will hear from us in the next couple of days with links to the recorded version and the slideshow. And do watch for information on next month's webinar on UX design and software development process. That will be coming up on November 12th. We do appreciate your feedback, so drop us a brief email at our email address as well to let us know your thoughts about today's webinar. Thank you all again so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Jan, for today's session as well. Very informative, terrific conversation between you both. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Carla. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Phil.
Bye.